Ich bitte Sie, mit mir zu begrüßen Cameron Sinclair.
Okay, let's see if we can get the slides. Can you guys hear me? Okay, this is good. Can I have my slides up, please? Whoa. I think they're going to squeeze it in a second. So I'm going to talk very quickly about the work of Architecture for Humanity and the role in which architects and designers can play in supporting the other 6 billion, as was mentioned earlier. It's really humbling following the previous speaker because, as you'll see in my presentation, that on the ground you hear and see all these quiet heroes, and they're really the ones that we should be listening to. And I think we are very honored to hear one of the quiet heroes of Nigeria. So we are Architecture for Humanity. We're a global organization of design and building professionals that focus our attention on humanitarian issues. We provide professional design services to communities in need. About 50% of our work is post-disaster and post-conflict reconstruction, and the other half focuses on systemic issues of poverty, access to education, healthcare, etc. More importantly is that we build. I truly believe there are millions of ideas that can change the world, but unless you build them, it doesn't matter. You have to actually implement. Implementation is the key for solutions. Ideas are not enough. We have to discover new ways to imagine the future. So we have worked on a wide spectrum of projects, whether it be the Plastiki, which was 16,000 PET bottles that sailed across the Pacific, to working on bamboo, seismically sound housing structures in Pakistan after the flooding. But more importantly is to create social and economic change in these communities. To date, we've worked in about 44 countries. We've done about 400 projects, and approximately 2 million people either live, learn, heal, or work in structures that we've built. This year, we're going to build in about 20 countries, and we've been working a lot on post-disaster reconstruction issues. I never thought that we would be living in a year where we've ended up working on almost every part of the globe. But the thing to remember about post-disaster reconstruction, like when the media disappears, there's a lot of focus on relief and recovery. But after about 4 months, people lose interest and they don't focus. And to really, truly do the good work of reconstruction, you need to be there from 4 months to 4 years. So rather than being a first responder, we have to be a last responder. This is a good case. In post-Katrina, we worked for 4 years on the ground with communities to help do rebuilding. We built about 720 plus homes, working with many architects across the United States on low-cost housing. These were homes that would cost approximately 80,000, 90,000 euros for 2 to 3 bedroom homes, using sustainable practices and methodologies. This year, we're currently working in Chile, Haiti, Pakistan, New Zealand, and currently in Japan. I just came here from Sendai via San Francisco to see firsthand the needs. Just to note that we are all connected. I have the most depressing cell phone in the world. Every time there's a disaster, I get a text message. And, so every time I wake up, I get a list of text messages of what's happening around the world. The one thing I've tried to calm that down by saying, okay, any earthquake over 6.0, I will receive. Anything under, because I need to limit that depressing emails. But what I found is the ring of fire that you see here, in the last 9 months, there's been a series of major quakes that have caused devastation. 2 in Japan, 2 near New Zealand, Java, and of course in Chile. I live in San Francisco, which is the missing gap. So as you can see, if we look at plate tectonics, there is a theory saying that Vancouver, Seattle, and San Francisco will be getting earthquakes very soon. So Japan is a very different disaster. Most disasters happen in high-risk countries. These are usually countries with extreme poverty that do not have a disaster mitigation in place, do not have strong buildings. But here in Japan, we had the perfect storm of an earthquake, a tsunami, and a nuclear disaster. I'm actually going to be speaking tomorrow at the Vienna Hub, focusing on this. I'm actually going to talk about other projects, but one of the projects we're looking at is a village that we're working on. It's a fishing village, and this was the image before. This was a cluster of about 100 people, and a really amazing story. There was a helicopter that was taking land satellite photographs at the time of the tsunami, and the helicopter pilot saw the waves coming. And he called down to the village and he said, "There's a tsunami, you must leave the village." And the people said, "The government hasn't given any warnings, the boys have not signaled that there's a tsunami, we don't believe you." And he said, "Please, I implore you, you have to leave, you have to leave." And the village said, "Okay, okay, okay, just stop." And they turned on the tsunami sirens and they ran into the hills. Only 4 people perished in this village. Everybody else was saved. The entire village was destroyed. And just to give you an example, one of my architects, this is his home right now. You know, so even our own employees suffered in this. The great irony of this is it's 3 hours to go to the nearest shelter. So the entire village is currently living in a nuclear facility because there's no other place to stay right now. So we've been working with them about how to rebuild. We've also scaled our impact. So I have offices in Cape Town, Port-au-Prince, San Francisco, and Sendai. But we also have over 72 local chapters, about 4,500 architects working on local issues and also local disasters. We embed our professionals in the communities, not just about airdropping in architects, but working with local professionals and international professionals that live and work in the villages, towns, and cities that we're building. We partner them with local professionals to make sure that we get the social and cultural sustainability of the community right. We involve the community in the design and construction process. I am vehemently against the idea that local communities have to do sweat equity. There are many NGOs that say, well, the community is very lucky that we're coming to build a school or with houses. But these are communities who are in dire need of economic stimulus. And so we should be paying a decent wage to people to build their communities. I think it's actually a little disingenuous to go over and help when actually you're asking people to work for nothing. So we make sure that we hire locally and we pay locally and we do skills training. Also, sustainability is not about the environment. It's also about cultural and economic sustainability. People need to be able to have an economic stability in order to protect, conserve, and support their land. When people don't have the ability to feed their children or get a job, they end up destroying their communities. A good example is refugee camps. Refugee camps are an environmental disaster. If you look at the way that refugee camps, people have no hope of work, so they give up all hope of the environment. And the entire community ends up taking the firewood, the sanitation issues are terrible, and you can see there's a real need to have that social and cultural sustainability. And then economic and business development. The idea about getting architects involved is not just about providing services, but marrying investments. So I don't think of charities as having donations. It's about having an investment in development. So putting together expertise, whether it be anything from architecture, urban planning, seismic and structural engineers, with the construction capital, and focusing the contracts so that you're developing local economic impact and creating kind of job creation. We actually need this in the United States right now, so in terms of helping our economy. And then as an organization, we open source all of our architecture plans because our focus is on social change and not financial gain. So everything that we've done is all under Creative Commons licensing that allows you to download and replicate those buildings for free. So we're at the EARTHtalks. So I could do a whole talk on green stuff, right, on environmentally sound stuff. So whether it's straw bale construction that we worked with the Navajo on the Native American reservations, whether it's a seismic block that uses the agricultural waste so that you pay farmers twice to create seismically sound building blocks as well as for food, whether it's the bamboo seismically sound shelters in Pakistan or rainwater catchment in Sri Lanka. But we've got to talk about sustainability beyond green, the idea of how do we create good, strong places for communities to grow. I'll give you a good example. Urban acupuncture is something that we do every day, which is small-scale projects that create economic and social change in the communities. We're invited by the communities to do a project, and then we find funding and support to allow that to happen, or have funding from within that community. A good example is the Homeless World Cup Legacy Center. This is in Santa Cruz, Brazil. So you can actually turn this down for a second. I'll quickly explain. Elise, who's from the community, is explaining that this is a low-density slum. And what happens is, over the next 5 years, we know from our urban planning strategies and the growth of favelas and slums that this will become a highly populated and a very dense situation in 5 to 6 years. Now, what happens is, she's explaining, is right now there's like a mafia that controls the security in the neighborhood. Over 3 or 4 years, that will eventually be edged out by drug dealers, and those drug dealers will be eventually edged out by, gangs with machine guns, and becoming a very crime-ridden neighborhood. So, if we've come to the point in humanity where we can make preemptive strikes against another country, why can't we do preemptive strikes against social ill? So before this becomes a place of high crime, let's do urban acupuncture. Let's create spaces which limit it. So we have to also think differently about this. We don't just go to the academics. How do you stop drug dealers from taking over this neighborhood? Well, you invite them to the design team. You ask a drug dealer how they would set up an operation in this community to understand how to stop them. So in this neighborhood, you see there's a boulevard, and this boulevard connects 2 highways. And what would happen is, people come in here, they would give money to 13, 14-year-old kids, they would drive around, they would pick up the drugs from the houses that were distributing the drugs, and then they would drive out again. So that's exactly where you'll put your community facility and your youth facility, and you start building. So this is the facility. We work with Brazilian and Colombian architects, and we also work differently with the community. Community meetings don't mean doing a design and presenting it to a room like this and saying, anybody got any questions? That is not community engagement. That's a presentation. Community engagement is working every day on the streets. It's, instead of drawing drawings, using sports chalk to draw the building at 1-to-1 scale so people who live there can see it. Our Colombian architect, he realized that, as many meetings as he could do, he wasn't really reaching the thousands of people that lived in this community. So what he did is he worked with a local radio station to have his own DJ show, and it was a call-in show. You could either call in and have samba music, or you could talk about the project, and he did this every week. So suddenly 65,000 people are hearing about this project and understanding that they have a voice in this. So the building gets built, and it goes up very slowly. The one thing I should mention is, our engineers looked at this building and they said, this is a crazy building. What's going to happen on the roof? And I said, what do you mean? We're going to put grass on there, and it's going to interlink with the land, and there's going to be stages up there. And they said, do you want me to engineer this for Americans or for Brazilians? And I say, do you mean Americans? We're kind of big, right? They said, no. I wasn't making an insult. What I was saying is, if you do this in Brazil, the night that this building opens, 2,000 people will be on this roof, and they will be partying all night. That is exactly what we want to happen. An active space, a space with people, is architecture. A building without people is not architecture. It's just a building. So to truly be architecture, it needs to be inhabited. So we engineered the building to have 2,000 people to dance on the roof. The other thing to note is the community started to tell us that they thought our contractor was corrupt. And we said, what do you mean? What do you mean? And we were discussing with them. They said, because your building is like this, and it's not straight. You need to fix it. And I said, no, it's the design. You'll see. We reused the pitch. The pitch came from a Brazil game. You can see yellow and green. And then this is the final design for the building. I love this picture. I love this picture. Like I say, architecture is about creating a vessel where life happens. I want teenagers to hook up with each other. I want stray dogs. I want people to argue. I want emotion. I want people to feel that this is their building. So the one thing we also do with our work is there are no logos. No egos and no logos. If you're an architect, your name doesn't get to go on the building. If you're a donor, your name doesn't get to go on the building. The community names the building because it's theirs. You're just helping facilitate that process. So for me, this is a successful building because it has stray dogs and teenagers hooking up. So let's go to South Africa. In a place with very high crime, how do you use acupuncture points, a series of acupuncture points, to prevent crime? This is an area where we identified areas of high crime, working with a group called VPUU. These are hotspots of crime. And one area right near a school is where traditionally, we deal with tough issues, I'm sorry, but it's traditionally where women were raped, killed, and dumped. This was a horrible, horrible neighborhood, a very high crime. That is exactly where we put the project. We don't shy away. We don't put it up on the road where the donors are. You know, when someone drives in and goes, oh, it's too scary for you guys, so we're going to put the project up here so we can just drive up and take pictures and go. You put it in the heart of the community where it's needed. You put the acupuncture point where the pain is, and you begin to connect those dots. So having the kids involved in the design of this facility, there was after-school outreach, there's HIV/AIDS awareness and testing, rainwater collection and solar, a five-a-side football pitch, working with grassroots soccer. We did all the plans, distribute them freely. Making sure that all our buildings are off the grid. This is very important, and it's very important to show this because in the next 10 years, 2 billion people are going to get power. They're going to get electricity. 2 billion people are going to get electricity. What are they going to get? Nuclear? Or are they going to get micropower? Are they going to have localized power solutions that create jobs? We think that this is the solution, and we need to show it. So this is a little lighthouse. And the reason that this is important is that this facility interconnects all these little acupuncture points. And when something happens here, the light goes off. And it relays all the way to the police station and the hospital so that you can go down through the community and you begin to tackle these issues very quickly. So a year after doing this project, the national crime went up by 1% in South Africa. Along these nodes, it went down by 20%. The murder rate went down by 2% in South Africa, but in this community, it went down by 32%. Those are impressive statistics. But for me, the most impressive statistic is the fact that perceived safety went up 200%. The idea that people felt this was a safe space. As you create perceived safety, more people say, well, my kids can play there. The more people's kids play there, the safer it gets. So the idea is you need to instill this idea of confidence of community spaces. I have no time for this one. I'm going to just bypass this one. This is very quickly, Oh, no, I have an extra time request later. So, because I wanted to show this for Jan, actually. I put this in. I'm really sorry, because, you know, we've done a lot of work in Kenya, and I know that your heart is there, too. The one thing about education, everyone says free education for everybody. We need to make sure that everybody gets educated. People don't think about what it takes to be educated. So 50% of girls in this region drop out of school after elementary school. It's not why you think. It's not because of sexism. It's not because of lack of opportunity. It's because of lack of sanitation. You know, I'm a guy. It took me a while to realize this, but in their teenage years, girls have different things that happen to them. And they need safe, secure bathrooms and sanitations, and they find there's a massive drop-off. And in Kenya and many other countries, for every year that a girl isn't in school, every year that a girl is in school after elementary school adds 5 years to her life expectancy. So when you talk about economic stimulus of a country, simply putting in clean sanitation in schools creates economic stability for a country. So we were doing a basketball court, and we kind of misbehaved, and we actually created a rainwater court that collects all the rain for the, well, we over-engineered it. It was supposed to collect all the rain for the school, but we realized that it actually collected enough rain for the entire village. And so this was the day we opened, and we did the first basketball game with the kids. And by the end of the match, the first rains for over 2 months happened, and we collected enough water for the entire village for 4 months in 1 hour. So the idea that they now have a resource for water that's not just for the school, but the community as a whole. So let's look at small-scale project. This is a $250 project. Our team in Dhaka, Bangladesh, were on the streets, and they found this guy who was selling tea. And they struck up a conversation while buying some tea, and they said, well, what are the things that you face? And he said, for the last 15 years, I've been living between two buildings, 18 inches wide and 30 feet deep. And he lives there with his family and his children. And he loses a lot of money because when people come to rob him, there's only one way in and out. And he's going to protect his children over his money. So he says, take my money, just leave my children out of this, right? So he said, I just need a safe place to live. He was unable to get housing, so our architects decided to become activists, which is, for very little money, they built a house that's 18 inches wide and 30 feet deep for about $255. And you can see this is a security gate, and this is a place to make tea. 6 months later, the tea seller came back to our architects and says, I want to hire you. Now, this is a man who makes 25 cents a day. When someone who makes that much wants to hire you, you know you've been successful. He said, I want to expand my business. I want to have a mobile tea shop that goes into the richer parts of town, and I could sell tea into the financial district, and I could charge more. And secondly, I really love this idea of utilizing solar in my projects. And the architects, their eyes lit up. They were like, this is fantastic. You're really into renewable energy systems. And they said, you know what we could do is we could connect the solar panel to the cooking, and then you can have hot water to make the tea. And he looks at them and he said, that is the dumbest idea I ever heard. He said, I'm 60 years old. I know how to make tea. What I want the solar panel for is I want to connect it to mobile phone chargers, and while people wait for their tea to be brewed, I charge them some money to charge up their cell phones. So, This is a perfect example if you don't need to go to Harvard or MIT to be a genius. When you understand that sustainability is a matter of survival, you innovate very rapidly. And I find more innovation in the favelas and the slums and the rural communities that I work in than often I find in some of the universities I teach in. So we're going to quickly talk about Haiti. And I'm going to show a little video. Can we have the sound up on this?
They've been through so much.
Believes the quake has taken hundreds of thousands of lives.
And millions of people out here with no shelter, no water, and no
before they die from.
I'm going to stop that short. The reason I show that is I want to talk about the power of social networks. It may come to surprise you that over 50% of our funding for Haiti and Japan has come from children under 18 years old. It's all come online. So in Haiti, I had a young girl who connected with me on Facebook. She instant messaged me, and she told me I was an idiot. I said, why? And they said, but you should be building buildings because you're an architect. Let us raise the money. She was a young filmmaker in her early 20s. And I said, yeah, right. She said, give me 2 days. In 2 days, she produced that video. On the Monday, there was a big party. They had their iPads and this thing called a Square, which takes credit cards. And in less than an hour and a half, they raised enough money to build a school for us. And so here's me in my mid-30s thinking, what do these kids know? And they begin to surprise you again and again and again. In Japan, some kids had this idea, let's make paper cranes as a way of solidarity for Japan. I talked to a friend of mine who's a donor, and I said, look, this is a great idea. They said, well, we will donate $1 for every crane made, and let's see if they can make 100,000 cranes. We just use Facebook, Twitter, things like that. In 3 weeks, I'm so glad that I gave my friend's address, we had over 1 million cranes. So almost all of our funding for Japan has come from kids making cranes. So going back, so the idea of the power of social networks is to understand that that $1, $2 donor in 5 years will be a $10 donor, who will eventually be a $100 donor. And as a young organization, you need to pull in funding at that level. So very quickly, this is what we face in Haiti. We were working in Haiti before the earthquake, and we were asked to get involved afterwards from many, many communities. We realized that there's over 1 million people displaced. And here's the one thing that people don't tell you. In the reconstruction effort, we've pledged over about 5-6 billion. 2 billion, I think, is from EU. So the protocol was that we wouldn't release any funding until it was administered by the president. We only got a president in Haiti this month. So now it's at stage 1. Then it goes to the parliament and the ministries. Then it goes to cluster groups, which are big NGOs that manage the different departments of education, health. Then it goes to pre-approved contractors. And believe me, a lot of these pre-approved contractors are for-profit companies that you wouldn't dare give money to. Then they give it to subcontractors because they don't know how to work in Haiti because they've never worked there before. And then they give it to the Haitian people. By the time it gets to the Haitian people, it's more like 10 cents on the dollar. So we need to find a way to stop this being the stumbling block to recovery. We have to be more like a tugboat and less like an oil tanker, to move very swift and adapt to the issues on the ground, and to realize that mechanisms for funding have to happen from the bottom up and not the top down. We do this by having a rebuilding center, a one-stop shop to get architecture. If you come in here and your name gets on this wall, you're getting a building. Your name doesn't come off this wall until we complete your project. And when you see this wall, you see your friends, you see your neighbors, you see other NGOs. You can see the projects that we're doing in Haiti right now, and we're using that same methodology that I showed earlier. We do a 101 rebuilding manual to allow people to rebuild their own homes. We figure out on-site construction training and quality control of materials. We analyze and expose what all the other NGOs are doing, and we begin to assess, like, is this dignified housing? Is this dignified housing? You know, and how much are they paying? The fact that you can pay $12,000 for something like this, or $250 for something like this, for something that lasts the same amount of time, we need to assess our own work. Developing professionals on the ground that have access to international aid funding, doing construction training and developing masonry training, and then jobs. And we're doing jobs mainly through schools, and we have a number of funders that are helping us to build schools. I have no time for this, but I will show you the schools. We are currently in the process of building 20 schools. The interesting thing about these schools is they're quite unique. They're designed locally with local architects. They integrate the landscape. They integrate not just garden and horticulture, but organic vegetables that are grown within the school so that you can have school lunches. They use local sustainable materials, whether it's, you know, we're even working on a project where we're growing the bamboo that's going to be harvested to build the school. And this actually is the most exciting drawing that our architects have come up with in Haiti. They are so excited about this, and they would be so proud that I'm mentioning this drawing. This is a Trom wall solar flue composting toilet. You can basically poop in here, and this Trom wall will force all the smell and all the fumes and all the insects and everything out, and then you can use this composting to put in the garden so that you can have a natural fertilizer to grow the food. So it's a closed-loop system. So they're so excited about sanitation in all these schools. So on one end of the spectrum, we're putting these in all our schools, and on the other end of the spectrum, we're working with Haitian artists and sculptors to make sure that we have arts in the schools, because the idea of aesthetics is as important as ethics. If you have a beautiful space, people maintain and protect that, as well as one that has dignified space. So more projects we're doing. This is a school that we opened in March, and last year we put about 3,400 kids back in school. We're working on $5,000 homes. We've worked on birthing facilities. This was a place where women were giving birth. 8 women on deck chairs in a plastic tent. I've watched a woman give birth like in a hospital with tubes and everything. It is the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if any guys here have watched real life birth. there is no horror movie that can prepare you for watching a live birth. It is I'm pale, but I went paler. I mean, I was like super, and so there I was in Haiti, and I see this is where women are giving birth. And of course, the rains are coming down. So our team worked with those in the refugee camps, many of the men whose mothers and daughters and wives were giving birth, to build this in less than a week and to have a dignified place to give birth to a child in. For-profit health clinics we're doing in India for $2,500, being able to build 8 of them, build a manual for replication locally, and allow that to scale. So the idea is not just creating these facilities, but figuring out a mechanism for replication. This is my 10 minutes. Can I ask for... I was going to talk about open source. So I don't know if it was mentioned, but last week I just joined the Obama administration and as an advisor. And... but believe me, this might be the shortest tenure in the world because I'm going to reform all international aid. I want to turn the whole international aid system on its head and figure out a way to... So the idea happened from 7 billion. 7 billion people that currently live on planet. How can we create dignified structures, dignified spaces, and access to basic human rights for 7 billion people? We were able to scale our network to an immense level by a simple gesture, one phone call. I got a phone call from this group called TED, and they said, hi, is this Cameron? I said, yes. They said, this is TED, you've won the TED Prize. And I said, who is TED? I had no idea what it was, and it's a conference in California, and they said, you get to wish for anything you want in the world. I was like, it's California, I thought they were on drugs, you know? And they said, no, you wish for anything you want in the world, we'll make it happen. So I said, okay, we know how to make innovative ideas. I know I was young and slim then. We know how to make innovative ideas. We need to find a mechanism to share them openly and allow the recipients to have a voice in the development of their own communities. And so we built the Open Architecture Network as a mechanism to do project management, to share ideas, and the idea to open source all architectural innovation to improve human life. In 4 years, we had 6,000 projects, over 30,000 construction professionals involved. And these range from straw bale lending libraries in South Dakota to weaving cooperatives in India to health clinics. This is your local a hero, Astrid Dahmen, who built a school. She's from Austria, built a beautiful school in South Africa with the community that could be replicated throughout the continent. Low-cost housing on the Gulf Coast, school in China. My personal favorite, so on the Kenya-Sudan border, for those who have seen Jan's film Home, you would see that camels are used a lot for transportation. Doctors are in a village, and they're treating patients for about a week, and then you wrap up the clinic and you put it on the back of a camel, you put a solar panel on the top of the camel, you hit the camel on the butt, it walks over to the next village, and in the time it's taken to walk to the next village, it's generated enough energy to run the clinic in the next village. It's a camel-powered clinic. So, what makes this all the more amazing is this is a collaboration between 20-year-old designers and local medical professionals on the Sudan border. They weren't willing to wait until they were 60 years old to become Frank Gehry and famous to do this idea. It was too important for the community. So they said, you know what? You know, the amount of money I pay for my education, I'm going to use some more money to build a prototype and get it done. And so far, there are now 6 routes of clinics in operation, thanks to the 20-year-olds. The architecture is not just about communities that are about health and education. They're also about solemn spaces. So, you know, this is a chapel, but they're also about political spaces. This is a shelter somewhere between Mexico and the United States for those people that are running across the border and they need shelter from crazy people shooting at them for being illegal immigrants. So I had nothing to do with this project, but I'm just saying that architecture, all architecture is a political act. Any architect who tells you that architecture is not political is not an architect. And I mean that because the buildings that you build are either a detriment or a positive to the planet. And if you don't understand that the work that you do has an impact not only on those people who have paid for the building, but the community as a whole, and culture, then you don't understand what it means to be an architect. So I positively believe that as an architect, you are creating a political act, and whether it be as radical as raising the awareness of immigration or creating a place of solitude, it's important. So the other thing I noticed is accountability. We're doing all this great work around the world, but people are they're comparing me to the wrong people. They're saying, Cameron, what's it like to be, considered like this famous architect? What are you talking about? You shouldn't be comparing us to a famous architect. You should be comparing us to the other NGOs doing development work around the world and begin to identify the transparency in that process. So we created an iPad app called Open Architecture, and you can zoom in right down to the village level to see the building and live data showing you the project in development, the cost of the project, and so you have full accountability of projects, right? So you can say, look, this is what a $20,000 school looks like, this is how it's built, and this is how you can replicate it. We were working in Pakistan, and those bamboo houses that I showed you cost around $880 per home. And the way we were able to get funding is we worked with a company that's a search engine, pretty well known. And I said to them, never go to foundations. If you're a nonprofit, don't go to foundations. They take so long. Go to marketing departments and talk to them as if it's a project. So I said to people, look, this is not about housing people. This is a GPS mechanism. You can see how you can do GPS data. We can geotag every house. And the next time that you do a satellite, you can see the house there. True accountability. The people who do mapping got so giddy about this, they just gave us marketing money. They were like, oh, this is awesome, right? They didn't do it because of humanistic reasons. They did it because it just sounded cool. So while we were doing this, I heard that the US had given $250 million to Pakistan for the flood. And a month later, I happened to be going to the State Department and the World Bank and USAID. And I was supposed to give all these presentations. I scrapped the presentations. I went as a taxpayer, and I wanted to know where my $250 million was. So I went around and I knocked on every door. I said, where's my $250 million? You just show me where it is. For 2 days, nobody could tell me what happened to the money. They were like, I don't know, it's in this department. Well, it goes to accounting, and then it goes to the I was like, I just want to, just show me one school, show me one, and they just couldn't do it. They didn't know what they had done with the money they had given out. This is $250 million. This is taxpayer money. So I said, why can't we have true transparency, and you can actually see the good that we can do in the world, and actually, if we care about the environment, every development dollar that we send overseas should adhere to the same ethical environmental standards that we believe for our own citizens, right? If you say that, if you're saying the people of Austria should have clean environment, healthy living, the funding that you give as development country to say, Nigeria should have the same level of accountability. Because all you're doing is you're creating a broken system and not giving them the best opportunity for growth. So we need to build a recipient-focused system, not focused on the donor, not focused on the NGO, but the recipient that's focused on giving them a voice, using cell phone technology. If I'm building 20,000 houses in Haiti, every house should come with a cell phone that gives a texting mechanism to allow 20,000 people to tell me whether that house is built correctly, whether it leaks or not. So the idea that you learn, build, and create with a three-way system. And we do that, and this is a very boring system, about how you do the collaborative software and the management. Okay, I have no time for this, but I'm going to say thank you. Just ignore this. This is coming later. Very quickly. So later on this year, we're doing a project because the most sustainable building in the world is the one already built. So I began looking at military facilities, and I realized that you could actually take military facilities that are abandoned and closed, and in the US we spend billions of dollars every year on environmental remediation of these facilities, and then they end up dead, to actually use them for civic spaces. And we know in Germany that they've done this with French barracks. Why can't we do it with our military institutions? I write for something called World Changing, and in a project, a story we did a couple of years ago, we talked about the greenest military facility in the world. This is it. It's on a former nature preserve, beautiful view of the Caribbean. Because of the host country not being happy with the military facility, they cut all water and power to the facility. So the administration who was managing it did a wind farm and desalination. So it's actually the greenest military facility in the world. It happens to be in a bay called Guantanamo. Gitmo is the greenest facility in the world. How messed up is this? So it's over 100 years old, so it's a historic preservation project. We planted 55,000 landmines in the 80s and then picked them back up again. I love geography people. There's a geography person from Stanford who found a different satellite mapping company that wasn't blurring out military installations and has mapped the entire growth of Guantanamo Bay, so we have full plans of the growth of Guantanamo Bay. And then in January 22nd, the Obama administration said that we were going to close Gitmo, right? So on the 24th, we wrote to them and said, Architects for Humanity, we're willing to take Gitmo off your hands. We waited for a few weeks, and we got an email back, and it said, sure. We're like, seriously? And then we were like, wow, they didn't take us as a joke. They said, seriously. So it went backwards and forwards, and we've been debating backwards and forwards, and eventually they said, no, you can't have it, it's too political, it's a nightmare. But I actually think that there's something about environmental diplomacy, that we can actually retrofit Guantanamo, give the land back to Cuba, and create a mechanism for diplomacy between the two countries. So I'm actually going to scale this to all military facilities in the world, that we can actually reimagine these spaces as civic spaces, and we're going to launch this later this year. So that's our last project. So finally, our mantra. Follow your heart, break the rules, and get it built. Thank you.